Good morning and welcome to everybody to this panel discussion. The topic of this panel discussion is the importance of building trust in and with the communities that we serve. So as we know, central to service delivery are the residents which municipalities serve. And in order for us to deliver on our intended outcomes, it is critical that we are in good and trusting relationship with the communities that we serve. However, as the saying goes, trust is hard to build and easy to lose. And with that in mind, we have the privilege of 5 experts who've done extensive work at community level, including grappling with questions around how do you build trust. So I look very forward to being in conversation with these 5 experts. In a moment, I'm going to be introducing them, but just so you know, I'll be posing questions to each of our panelists. We'll be in discussion for about 40 minutes, and then we'll be opening the floor to questions and discussion. So, Mike Abrams, if you don't mind me calling you up first because you're in my line of sight at the moment. Mike, just by way of introduction, who are you? What is the organization that you work for? And then your response to this question. In the context of communities and municipalities, how do you define trust and the behaviors that underpin it? And Mike, you've got 1 minute for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. With a surname like Abrams, I'm always first. Okay? So it's fine. I'm from an organization called R Cubed, which stands for Restore, Reconnect, and Rebuild. We work with intergenerational trauma and structural violence in communities, organizations, and large systems. I think what I want to say about trust is that trust is about a human-to-human connection. It cannot be imposed, and it cannot be said, we trust each other. It's something which needs to grow. So as part of trust and as part of building human relationships, what do we need to grow? We need to grow our authenticity. So we need to be real, really who we are. We need to grow empathy, and that requires us really to open up our mental models and to deeply understand other people's positions. And we need logic, so people can understand that what we do is understandable and logical, and they can make sense of it. And that's what helps to grow trust. Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much. Leanne, over to you, please.
Hi, I'm Leanne from Salimbush University Water Institute, and we look at building trust on issues of water governance. Yeah, I think I'm an ethics, my background is philosophy and environmental ethics, so I look very much at researching the relationship between human beings and environment, and in that relationship, obviously there are mediators like municipalities, Department of Water and Sanitation, provincial departments of agriculture. So my research area is adaptive collaborative water governance. So I'm looking at how governments and especially municipalities interact with communities around water governance. And the areas that I've been focusing are informal settlements, and in particular Stellenbosch, and at the moment the Philippi horticultural area, where we're looking at the management of the Cape Flats aquifer and canal restoration.
And Leanne, just in 1 sentence or maybe 2, well, how would you define what trust is?
So trust for me is something that's built up over time, and it's related to action and truth, and communities and municipalities over time building up good relationships on deliveries, on service delivery.
Excellent, Leanne. Thank you very much. Michael, I'm over to you now. You probably know the drill by now.
Thanks very much, Alison. My name is Michael Krause, and I'm heading up an organization that's called Violence Prevention Through Urban Upgrading. We're a public benefit organization, and we're sitting in as an intermediary between the public sector and the citizens, with a large focus on low-income communities that obviously includes a lot of informal settlements as well. And our aim is to provide safe and sustainable neighborhoods from different angles, and that only happens through dialogue. So we're primarily operating in the Western Cape, but also branching out to the rest of the country. In terms of the question of what's trust in the context, I think for me, and Michael and Leanne have already spoken about it, that's around individuals, about human beings. And I'm very much aligned to that. It's a process. I think you can build trust in if you get to a climate of safe and courageous conversations, and that you show certain vulnerabilities. I think trust can only grow if everybody who's involved in the dialogue feels safe, can say, and information remains within a particular space. And if you go outside that space, that we agree what is shared and what's not shared. And that's really, really important. And we have seen very positive, and we have seen lots of positive examples, I think, like everybody of us. Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you. Blessing, I'm going to move to you now, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe just to confirm if you guys can hear me, considering the technical problems that we experienced earlier on. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Blessing Manishana. I am with CORC, C-O-R-C, which is Community Organization Resource Center, an NGO which falls under SASDI Alliance. So in the Alliance, I'm actually the national coordinator of all the community data collections that are done by the communities that we support in terms of settlement profiling and also community enumerations. And I even support with my technical expertise of GIS. I also support the communities in mapping their communities using GIS. So as an organization, we are based mainly in data collection, where communities collect their own data, which they then use as a tool of engagement. Apart from the data, there are other activities which we call the rituals in our alliance. So those rituals involve other activities which are in relation to data. But in this case, I will focus more on data because that is my area of support in the organization. So in terms of defining trust, I think I will actually add to what the earlier speakers have said, because they seem to have said what trust is. But in our context, trust is when the communities and obviously the major shareholder in our space is the municipality. They are actually in the same, they get to a level where communities feel that they are not just passive recipients, but they are participants who are recognized, whom their efforts are recognized in that participation. So in that way, trust is garnered, and at the same time, the municipality seeing the communities as people who can support the process, not as not to be viewed as detractors of whatever that needs to be implemented. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Auntie, finishing off with you. Thank you.
Thank you for making me a part of this panel. My name is Pankti Dalal. I'm a master's in public administration candidate at Columbia University here in New York City, where I'm currently based out of. So as a part of our research at the university, I have been a part of a team of 5 graduate students that have been working with the city of Cape Town over the past 4 months in performing evaluation of feedback mechanisms to improve water and sanitation service delivery in informal settlements in Cape Town. So that's where my connection with this topic comes from. In terms of how do you define trust, I believe that, like Michael said, it is something that grows over time, and especially in the context of the city and its residents, I think it's something that is important and we need to look at efforts that are more collaborative and solutions that are designed for not designed for residents but with them. And I think that this trust and its underpinning behavior only comes out of some sort of accountability between the two. So that's how I see.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody. I must say the piece that stands out for me is this human-to-human element and the fact that trust is something which has grown and nurtured over time. So thank you very much to everyone for your rich reflections. So Michael Kraus, you're up first, and the question that I would like to pose to you, Michael, is as follows. How do we break the cycle of mistrust and distrust linked to poor or lack of service delivery? So let me say it once more. How do we break the cycle of distrust and mistrust linked to poor or lack of service delivery? So Michael, you've got 3 minutes to share your reflections on that question. How do we break that cycle of mistrust? Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. As I said in the intro, I think it really has to do with a dialogue. We have to see each other as partners so that we can start trusting each other. And the word accountability that Punky put in is also a very good word. So what are the groups, what are the forums where the city or the municipality in a particular case can engage in a non-threatening way with the communities? Often we walk into situations, and I think I speak for most of the speakers, that are quite hostile. There's an antagonistic relationship about lack of service delivery or whatever the situation is, or people seen as illegal dwellers, etc. And one needs to break that, and you can only break that through a continuous process. So the process that we are suggesting and that the city is embracing to a large extent is that of a dialogue. So that there's an intermediary or there's a mediator. In some cases it's us, or it's Blessing with Cork, or it's other organizations that come in and have an agent role to play for the local communities. And there's a caucusing that takes place with the local communities. So how do we formulate a position as a local community, as a leadership of a particular settlement? And how do you formulate a position as the city or as the municipality, which is often fractured because there are different departments, different priorities. In our settlements where we work, we then bring that together, that dialogue, and have an open conversation, a non-threatening conversation that allows for everybody, for the city or the municipality to provide the constraints and the possibilities, and for the community also the desires. We got a certain tactics, a couple of tactics that we are using is called the community action plan, where you look what is the baseline, what's the status quo. So you're looking at evidence-based and data-driven information that you present to the local leadership as well to the municipality. And then we got a system or a process here in the city of Cape Town through the sub-council processes that you get accountability of officials and politicians as well. So we're trying to marry that, and in essence it is to embrace the existing systems and where there are gaps to fill those gaps. But it is a process, and one of the biggest challenges that we have is the consistency, so that we're not changing the officials or the colleagues that are responsible for one particular. So this is one of the challenges, but I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you very much. Would any of the other panelists like to add to Michael's response in terms of approaches for breaking the cycle of distrust or mistrust? Anyone like to add to that?
I would.
Michael, yeah, sorry, Leanne, thank you. Off you go.
Yeah, so from the Water Institute side, what we find very useful is sticking to the topic of water, because water runs through, so it runs through communities and it's not really owned by anyone, and very much action based. So we talk about how to clean the water rather than how do we all not get on, and that's how we've started our conversations in the informal settlement of Inkaneni and in the PHA. And it's by sticking to that and sticking to action rather than how we're all at different points of view has also moved things on. So for example, in the PHA, the issue is we need a digger loader to unclear the blocked canal that is flooding the informal settlement and the farmland. And so how are we going to solve that problem so that everyone's happy? So it's that kind of looking for the spaces where there can be agreement and focusing on action. As it's moved the conversation beyond how we differ.
And Leanne, I would imagine that whilst doing that, always bearing in mind kind of the key ingredients around trust building and relationship building. But as you say, using water as your focus for building momentum, creating action, and so forth. Absolutely. Thank you, Leanne. Yes. Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. You'll see we'll slowly start building the conversation. I'm Blessing, just to warn you, the next question is coming your way. And the question is as follows. What makes for good engagement? How do we build effective engagements in large systems characterized by inequality? What makes for good engagement? How do we build effective engagements in large systems characterized by inequality? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, in terms of good engagements, the first thing that is that needs to be considered is everyone who is part of the engagement shall be a willing player, and also needs to be actually recognized that as a participant, his efforts, his or her own efforts in this in the participation and submissions, everything are also considered in such a way that they see at the end of the day, they will see change coming through some of the things that they actually contributed in the partnership or engagements that happen. So, you know, in most cases, much of the engagements have been more like a top-down approach, whereby whoever the professionals from their offices, they will see the situation, they plan about it, and just come to implement. So in that way, that sums up a wrong or an improper engagement, because there wasn't any proper consultation to the people or to whoever that is involved. So we will just focus mainly, like, for example, if you are to implement a project, the success of any project is actually depends on the comprehension by the beneficiaries and their full participation. So if you need to engage positively, obviously you will need to first check what those beneficiaries or recipients or whatever that needs to come in, what do they want? So in that way, you come up with a plan through what the community or whoever is disadvantaged needs, because it becomes very difficult to continue talking of something that is not actually a priority to these participants or to these people that are involved in this engagement. So at the end of the day, you end up somehow losing the track all the way, or at the end of the day, end up having a non-successful project or anything that needs to be done in that particular engagement. So in most cases, you know, the most important thing, we've got a more like a small motto that we use, which says nothing about us without us. So in that way, you know that everyone is involved. One feels entitled to participate and contribute, because we, you know, by bringing in that person, allowing him or her the space to to share and come up with some ideas. That one is the first point of entry, which he helps whoever that is disadvantaged to feel that I am also considered in the process. So it's, however, it somehow becomes difficult when it involves municipalities in terms of engagement, because sometimes we have to also accept actually that municipalities, they have got their own protocols and their own procedures that they follow when engaging, you know, these disadvantaged or poor communities. So usually they will not go directly to communities, and they will follow their own protocols, whereby maybe whoever that they engage with is not actually a person of interest to this community, or is not someone whom they consider maybe can be a counselor, but they are not in good books. Therefore, anything that comes through that way sometimes finds it difficult, and it highly affects the engagements that happen. Because usually, the officials will come, but they have to follow their own way. And then this other side, that way that is followed by the other group, they are not happy about. So at the end of the day, it ends up becoming a difficult kind of an engagement between the two parties. But the most important thing is acknowledgement of those poor or the disadvantaged, that they are useful in the process. If that one is attained from the beginning, it plays a very big role, because the project, the most important part of the project is not the actual implementation actually, but it is the build up to that implementation, where all the things and where most of the things that are covered are part of the question that you asked, like the mobilization, the engagement, the trust, and everything. So if that is not attained in the first phase, then the implementation, yes, it might proceed, but it won't. It's highly likely going to not to achieve the expected results. Thank you very much. I think let me just end here, because I believe we have a stream.
Thank you very much. What strikes me about your response is that one way in which to do good engagement in a context of inequality is to introduce equality into the way in which you engage. And that starts off by seeing people as your equals, as your partners, as your co-collaborators, so that one engages with them rather than does engagement to them. So I just appreciated that kind of perspective that you brought. So thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, any comments from the fellow panelists who'd like to add to what Blessing has shared there?
Yeah, I would, if you would allow me, Alison. Thank you. I think to add to what Blessings and Michael have said, I think that we need to talk a little bit about empathy. And what does empathy mean in this kind of context? And I think we've got to go back to, where are we starting from? We're starting from a position of high levels of distrust. We're not starting from an equal position. We can't just step into a room and be equal with each other. We need to work at that, and we need to work at that very hard. And I think part of Blessing is giving us some idea around what they do to work at it. I think I want to add in something which is called intergenerational trauma and structural violence. So if we want to go into this relationship, and we are saying trust has to do with authenticity and an existing relationship of distrust, then we need to acknowledge what is going on now, the distrust communities have for officials, and we need to have a process of restoration of that. And we can't just go into a room and say we're all equal and then it's going to work out. So what we are busy piloting with or prototyping with VPUU is, how do we help officials and community leaders to understand the impact of intergenerational trauma in an engagement? So how do we trigger each other? And how do we make it more tense for each other because of this? We're all carrying intergenerational trauma in our bodies. And I think we need to work with much more with what people bring, and we need to resolve some of those issues for people so we can rebuild authenticity, and that will grow empathy. If people can't make that human contact, we will not grow empathy. The human contact requires us to deal with issues of structural violence and the distrust that already exists. Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much for adding that extra layer there. I appreciate just the kind of urging for us to be brave about facing what sits there and what gets in the way of these ideals around equality and equity. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Leanne, next question for you. So Leanne, what I'd like to speak to you about is this idea of data fatigue within communities. And my question is very much around how does one deal with data fatigue, where you get numerous different organizations, including municipalities, seeking data, gathering data, engaging with communities, and then often added to that, communities not always getting feedback on the data gathered and how it was used, etc. So the general topic is data fatigue, and it's linked to trust and mistrust. Thank you.
Yes, I'm thankful. Thank you for that question. It's actually something that we've dealt with extensively here at the Water Institute. Stellenbosch University is very close to one of the informal settlements here in Kaneni, and we had just about every department working in the informal settlement because it was the closest place to research. And what happened was exactly that. Actually, research fatigue. People didn't trust the university, didn't trust researchers because there wasn't this feedback loop. So in our last water project in informal settlement, we actually had we got all the university researchers together who were working from the different departments, from sociology all the way through to microbiology, and we forced them to put on the table what projects they were doing in the informal settlement, so that there wasn't a community, being bombarded with a whole lot of similar or dissimilar projects. And that was one thing. So getting our act together from the university side and making sure that the university had an ethic and had that other departments knew what each other were doing, because there's a lot of academic sort of protection. People protect their research and don't let others in and that kind of thing. So from the academic point of view, we made sure that we were all on board, all knew what each other was doing. And then from the community side, we actually engaged them as co-researchers. So quite a bit what Blessing, I think Blessing, you might do this, I'm not sure, but we had, the Cork model of enumeration studies done by the community themselves. So we introduced, we selected with the help of the municipality, and that was the other thing, bringing the municipality in as well. So the municipality actually funded our research study, so they paid for it. And we went in there and we employed extended public works program people as co-researchers. And then we trained them in research methodology, and they researched themselves basically. And then workshopped with ward committees and street committees. So the whole thing from the beginning is involvement, and getting people to process their own data. So you don't have this sort of people being used as guinea pigs or information being extracted that's not, in fact, context, not from the context, it's taken from a perspective outside the community. So very much that. And then what we also have come to realize now, working in the Philippi area, we use Kobo, which is something used by the United Nations. It's a software which is very easy for people to use on their cell phones. So getting almost as many people as possible to be data collectors. And this program you can download in an app, and you can collect data, and that helps with institutional memory because it's on a platform, and it's easily accessible data. So and the other thing is multi-stakeholder groups. So making sure that you've got everyone on board in the community, and actually employing researchers from the community, and using an easily accessible data collection process. So that builds trust, and then feeding that back to the very community that's going to benefit from the intervention. So the whole time you're not leaving anybody out, and you're empowering people, being able to empower people with data collection. It makes people a lot more able to stand up in your committee and say, we interviewed a quarter of the population, and a quarter of the population are unhappy with the current toilets that are being put in the informal settlement. And in this way, it's that they can't be dismissed, their claims can't be dismissed, and they've already got the politicians on board. And so, yeah, they can't be hoodwinked, they can't be dismissed. There's facts on the table.
Yeah, and just one follow-on question from me. I very much appreciate this idea of engaging people as co-researchers and as involved in processing their own data. Can I just check with you, does that approach also assist with alleviating engagement fatigue? I just want to just check that link with you because I'm quite fascinated by that.
Sorry, I missed that. I just had to move.
We lost you for a moment there. My question is a quick one, and I'm just wondering, to what extent does engaging people as co-researchers and involved in the analysis of data, to what extent does that offset engagement fatigue? I mean, I could guess the answer, but I'd quite appreciate hearing that spoken to.
Well, the people, they don't feel they're being researched. They become the process. So they're not, it's not this sort of guinea pig, us looking from the outside in, especially on sensitive things like water and sanitation. I mean, it's people going to the toilet, it's people showering and stuff like that. I mean, no one wants to be researched like that. So when the community is doing it for themselves, they're involved, and if they know that it's not just research, it's going to be related to service delivery, then there's a good reason to be involved.
So it's almost the energizing effect of taking ownership of your own data collection, one could say. All right, we've lost Leanne for a moment. Sorry, yeah?
Yeah. It's knowing that there's an outcome that is going to benefit the community. There's a real benefit for this because it's going to improve service delivery.
Yeah, and thank you very, very much. It's really insightful. Just because I'm happy to keep an eye on the time, I'm going to move on to our next question. And Prakti, this is for you, just so you know. The question is as follows: how do you create effective communication and feedback mechanisms in informal settlements, particularly when residents don't have, for example, an earth number, they don't have access to a toll-free hotline? How does one then allow residents to log and track complaints to ensure accountability despite the challenges of their context? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Alison, for your question. So I think this is a very interesting question because this is exactly what we've been working on over the last 4 months. So as a part of our research, we've been studying the different feedback mechanisms that already exist within informal settlements in Cape Town at the moment. And we categorize them mainly in terms of formal and informal systems. So when you talk about formal systems, there you have the call center, you have email, SMS, website, WhatsApp, CT app, and all of these tend to be communication methods that tend to be one way, and they also face the same they face barriers in informal settlements where there is no connectivity or access to mobile phones. And we also found out that something as simple as the call center's number is not toll free. So so in terms of the formal systems, it's something as basic as just providing a toll-free number that itself would increase the access to informal settlements having a voice in what is happening in their backyard. And in terms of what we realized is that this human-to-human interaction, like all the other panelists mentioned, is extremely important. And while most cities tend to work on their formal systems, not enough attention is paid to the informal systems. And by informal systems, I mean there are janitors in the field as a part of the extended works program in the city of Cape Town that are actually from these communities. And we found that that's a very critical way in which the communities sort of register their complaints or share their feedback. So we felt that in our report, it was important to recommend scaling up these sort of programs where these workers can actually be used as a method of two-way communication, and they are from the communities. So there is sort of this trust cycle that is being built in that sense. Another critical point that we realized is the local representatives that are in these informal settlements. So many a times political leadership and leadership in the settlements work in silos, and they do not have an interaction within these formal complaint systems. So one of our recommendations was something called as the counselor code. So this is essentially when complaints are filed, the constituency of the councillor or the local representative should be included in the complaints, so that the political leadership is also aware of the issues that exist in their constituency, and they can be engaged more effectively and be used as communication tools to have a two-way interaction with the community. So that's another recommendation we thought that was extremely valuable. And lastly, of course, civil society organizations. There is a host of civil society organizations that exist in Cape Town, and it's important to recognize their efforts and make them co-partners with the city. We recently spoke to an NGO that had rolled out this Check IT app, where they had used Leanne's suggestion of using community members as a way of gathering data. But what we realized from their experience was that the way they collected data was actually not in line with the way the municipality managed their data. So the sustainability of the program was at stake, because there was no way to streamline the data that they were collecting into the formal way in which the city operated. So recognizing the different stakeholders that exist on ground and then sort of collaborating in a way that their data can be streamlined can also improve the question that you had posed to Leanne earlier about data fatigue and working in silos. So those are some of the experiences that we've had in evaluating feedback mechanisms. And lastly, I think some other common pain points that exist in formal settlements is that sometimes it's really hard to actually geolocate or even locate where complaints come from. So when improving formal mechanisms, it's important to find a way to do the COG style enumeration and understanding where these complaints are originating from, so that they can be resolved. And lastly, their interdepartmental communication on the city's end is extremely important as well. There are a lot of departments within the city itself that provide services in informal settlements, and often there is not enough internal communication, and which is why this sort of distrust arises, because there are even different departments from the city going into these informal settlements and doing work which is not coordinated. So another important suggestion to improve these feedback mechanisms was to have interdepartmental collaboration. And I would just like to end by saying that it's easy to go for tech-based options, but that human-to-human interaction and trust is important, especially in the context of informal settlements. And we must see that given the limited resources we have, how can we embrace the systems that already exist, like the janitors on the field or the local representatives. Yeah.
Thank you. So you did a beautiful kind of conclusion there at the end, so I won't use up any of the time repeating what you've just said, but thank you. So Mike, we're going to you for the final question, and then we're going to get some final comments from each panelist. So Mike, my question is as follows. From an organizational perspective, what factors within municipalities undermine trust building efforts, and how do we address these? So let me just repeat that. From an organizational perspective, what organizational or internal factors within municipalities undermine trust building efforts, and how do we address these? Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Let me check. Thank you, Alison. I think if you say organizational, my sense of it is that you need to do work inside the municipality, and you need to do work with the organizations in the community. You can't go and search for organizations which already might have a trust to the city or to the municipality. You've got to work. We build bridges from both sides towards the middle. So I think we've already mentioned that our municipalities often work in silos. So one thing would be to break down those silos and to have, I think we have best practice models right across the world of working in multi-sectorial or multidisciplinary teams. So we need to break down the silos. Then you need to build trust between the members. It's not just a matter of getting people from different departments into a room, because we've got all sorts of public finance management act issues around how you spend money and different line managers. And so there are many internal issues that need to be resolved in a large organization. So if we have a multi-sectorial team, who's the line manager? Because you can't have 12 line managers feeding into one team, all going off in different directions. Something simply as that. And then I want to use my spade, Alison, to dig a little bit deeper and say that we have to deal with our legacy and our history of structural violence. Unless we deal with this, and I think that's where VPUU comes in, unless we deal with this, we are always starting off with an unequal relationship based on distrust. So how is it possible for me to facilitate leadership workshops in a community at the same time as a local authority is evicting people? Yeah. So you can't do the same things at the same time, because an eviction of somebody 100 meters away or 500 meters away from where I'm staying means immediately I start distrusting the local authority. Okay, and then now the local authority comes along and says, please let us work together. How? So I think we in South Africa, we very much have ostriches' heads in the sand. You know, that thing of burying our heads in the sand, in the sense of we have come from a history of structural violence, and structural violence and trauma creates powerlessness, anger, fear. Now, how do we deal with those in the lead up to starting? Otherwise, you're coming into a community from a local authority that has a long history of structural violence in a situation where you want to build trust, where community members have poor service delivery, are evicted, don't have jobs, and we're not working at that. Nobody wants to call it that. Can we get officials to say, I come from an institution that is characterized by structural violence, and that we need to resolve it? We need to take a trauma-informed and a peace-building approach. When we had our transition in '94, and let's go back to the first 10 years of our relationships between the new government and communities, and we had things like the RDP program and so on and so on, we were clear. We were peace-building. Today, that seems to have gone completely out the window. What does it mean to build peace when an informal settlement is itself a violation of somebody's human rights? Of course, we can do it. And one of the audience members asked the question, what drives it? First of all, you deal with the personal issues, internally to the municipality and externally. And if you say this is going to take a long time, please contact me after this session, because we have examples in municipalities in the Western Cape where we have done this, and it hasn't taken an extra long time, and we're getting better results now. So we've got to, you know, there's a Buddhist saying, make your enemy my friend, your friend. Structural violence is our enemy. Let us make it our friend. Otherwise, we will not be able to use communication, feedback mechanisms, and etc., because that trauma makes us feel powerless, angry, and frustrated, and fearful, etc., and that's for officials as well as community leaders. Many officials say to us, but I fear to go into the community. I have family. What do I do? We need to deal with that stuff. Thank you, Alison.
Mike, thank you very much. I very much appreciate just kind of challenging us in that way. Thank you. I am just conscious of the time. It's 11:45. So panelists, if you don't mind, I'm going to, before I give you a chance to say your closing words, I'm going to just go to the floor and see what the questions are. So, and Mike, I'm hoping we can pick up during the questions on what you've shared there. So, Blessing, there was a question for you, and I've quickly got to find it here. Sorry, it seems to have escaped me. There we go. So Blessing, coming back to you, the question is as follows. how do municipalities make sure they are approaching community leaders who are actually on a good footing with the community? So how does one ensure we're speaking to the people who are trusted, who have the legitimacy to be engaged with? Any advice around that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. That one is, I can say there is no clear formula for that, but in our case is COKE, because we do have some support organization on ground. So what happens is that with these support organizations, they first engage directly with the leadership of the settlement. So in the first engagement with the leadership, that is when they tend to realize that there are either some factional groups and all those other things. So from that particular engagement, as I said earlier on, the most important part, even in a project, is not in a community project, is not the implementation part, but it is the build up towards the implementation. Because if you miss it in the beginning, that is the mobilization aspect, where all those kind of things are checked. Who are the real leaders? Who are the recognized leaders in the settlement? And in that process, you also check the community's relationship with other leadership structures within the area, like the development forums, even their councillor. So in that way, you tend to get a clear understanding. Then your findings in that and in the mobilization are the ones that are going to shape the kind of engagement that you are going to do. So I think that is, I don't know whether I fully answered that question.
Listen, it's perfect. It's providing emphasis, it's putting emphasis on the importance of that upfront planning, understanding your context, building those relationships before one moves into implementation. So thank you for that distinction. Leanne, next question for you. Somebody here just noting the importance of co-research and co-analysis and so forth, but the concern here is community needs are so immense. How do you ensure that community engagement doesn't send you down a rabbit hole with no impact?
I think the key here is multi-stakeholder. So the community cannot, like you cannot see the municipality as the final say, nor can you see the community as the final say. It's about getting everyone that has some kind of impact on service delivery or the issue at hand involved in the decision making. So if you leave it up to the community, you will also have a similar problem. So it's about making sure that community needs are expressed in a multi-stakeholder forum. So then, like the municipality could then respond and say, you know, we don't have those kinds of resources. We have these resources. And so as it's done in this multi-stakeholder forum, the expectation is then given a context. So yeah, that's the way I would address it. Make sure you always have as many of those having an impact on service delivery involved in the decision making, because then it's a realistic decision or an expectation that can be met.
And so it's not necessarily about speaking to everybody, it's making sure that you speak to the right range of people, that multi-stakeholder forum that you spoke about.
Yes, for that particular issue at hand.
Exactly. Thank you. All right, want to try and give voice to as many of these questions as possible. So whoever wants to answer this question, you're most welcome. The question is as follows: can somebody share examples of where the lack of trust between communities and municipalities has been overcome? And what were the key drivers in overcoming this? With Michael or Pankti, wondering whether you want to take a chance to answer that?
Thanks very much, Alison. Maybe in the context of, because we're talking about water and sanitation, and let's take a real example. Municipality was quite disappointed or fed up with certain things, that particular water taps were continuously vandalized. So what I want to talk about is let the data talk. And when you go into the data and when you ask people and drill in, why is that particular water tap in a particular settlement always vandalized, in inverted commas, or non-functional, we realized it was opposite a particular door of a particular house, and they basically make sure that the runoff of the water doesn't run into their house. So the response from the community, because no city official came and wanted to talk to the context, was to make sure the water tap doesn't work. So a simple intervention to say to the city officials, can we see, and now over 15 weeks that water tap has been continuously vandalized or non-functional, was to say, let's do a little bit of a redesign. And that immediately built a lot of trust, because a city official was seen as being immersed in the community, listen to the needs, co-design, and come up with a solution. So that's a simple solution. Other solution was that we basically showed to the city officials through that Check It app, which was mentioned earlier on. It actually works on Kobo, and it got a direct API to the C3 system. So it's working with the city relatively nicely. We're working on that, so the city can respond to it. Was simply to illustrate the distribution of the taps was basically resulted in a situation that 500 households share one water tap. So it wasn't vandalism, it was overusage. And those are two examples where the city then realized, okay, we have to provide additional water taps in that vicinity. And that's, for me, evidence-based and data-driven implementation. And that really took the anger out of the community and allowed everybody to on equal footing. And yes, Mike is absolutely right. We're sitting with the structural or institutional violence, and it's a big issue. We're not coming from the same basis. We're talking often over each other than with each other. So it's also the understanding of who's the expert here, and how do we play the expert card in inverted commas. Am I the expert because I'm the professional, or is the local resident the expert because they know the local context? And only if we marry the two, we will come up with the right solution. Either or will not work.
Michael, thank you. I'm going to put there's one final question, potentially one final question. It's around expectations. I'll invite either Michael or Mike or Pankti to respond. A number of people have raised concerns, or just this topic of unrealistic or unmet expectations. Unmet expectations. Whose responsibility is it to manage that? How does one manage it effectively? Any wise advice around the impact, dealing with the impact of unmet expectations and its consequences for trust?
Just to answer that really quickly, from like a very technical perspective, to speaking to what Michael said about data speaking for itself, I think that currently there's a lot of data that the city has on complaints, but there's just a generic 24-hour window in which they claim that the problems can be addressed, but it's not realistic given the nature of the problem and like the many issues that come in the way of resolving it. So I think one way of doing that is just actually utilizing the data, analyzing it, developing customer-centric KPIs on the end of the government, and using that data to give more realistic resolution times and action taken reports can sort of increase the accountability and expectations that are there with residents in informal settlements, so that they know that while it may not be fixed in a 24-hour window, they at least know that it will be fixed in 5 days or 10 days, given the nature of the problem.
Thank you. Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm wondering whether you have a trauma-sensitive or a trauma-informed response to the issue of managing expectations, whether there's any link there that we need to be aware of.
Thanks for that, Alison. I think there definitely is a link we need to be aware of. I think part of the difficulty is around communication. And from side of community, which officials do we trust? We were talking about finding community leaders or organizations that officials can work with. How about who do community leaders trust in terms of the municipality, and how is that trust built? So the one thing is that communications breaks down because we are overwhelmed and overloaded with trauma. Trauma leads to powerlessness, and it leads to poor communication. Anybody who suffered from an individual traumatic experience knows that communications suffer. So we think if we add more mechanisms of communication, it will get better, but it won't unless we deal with anger and powerlessness. And the problem is, if the community leaders can't trust the local authority, and are seeking service delivery, why shouldn't they have high expectations? If I'm from what's wrong with high expectations? If I'm from an informal, I live in an informal settlement and I go to work every day in Claremont, why shouldn't I have high expectations? I want my neighborhood for my children to look exactly like Claremont. So I have an expectation that the government, now we know that we can't deliver all of that in the next 5 minutes. That requires good communication and relationships that we understand each other and we can see over a long period of time how it will happen. And I want to just give one small example of this. An official who stands up in an informal settlement and says, this is my housing budget, the whole budget for the informal settlement for this year. I've experienced that. This is how we are going to use it. This is where I need input from you. And oh yeah, you wondering about where you are on the housing list. Please come to my office. The housing list is posted outside my office. You can check it out and see where you are. Now that begins to take a trauma-informed approach. We acknowledge where we're coming from. We recognize, witness, acknowledge the powerlessness that exists in that context, both for officials who might be managed by managers who don't agree with their particular approach, as well as from community leaders. So communication needs to be seen, poor communication, high expectations, needs to be seen through the lens of the betrayal of our governments over the last years, not only since '94, but the betrayal of working class people in South Africa for service delivery. And then the communication, we haven't put it right, those relationships. We don't recognize, see, and understand each other. We don't build authenticity between each other. We don't build empathy between each other. So people are going to communicate in the way they want to, which is demand and expectation led. Thank you for that, Alison.
And I think equally, one can imagine how easily officials can promise what they can't actually deliver, because the fear of communicating honestly is often quite petrifying, quite frankly, and people not feeling well enough equipped to stand in the heat of that fire. Absolutely. So ladies and gentlemen, we have 1 minute to go. I was going to ask the panelists for a final word of advice that they would offer to municipalities and those involved in service delivery, but I'm afraid they'll get cut off having barely started. So let me just finish off by saying thank you very much to our panelists for an incredibly thought-provoking session. I'm certainly left with a lot to think about. I'm not even going to pretend or even try to summarize it, but thank you very much for really pushing our boundaries around what trust takes, and equally what fuels the mistrust that we see evidence of in our day-to-day just experience of this country. Of course, all of us in different ways, but thank you very much for that. I have been asked to just alert you to the fact that there will be networking after this session, as well as a video, a closing video, and then opportunity for networking. So I'm very sorry to be cutting this conversation short. It feels like one that needs to go on for a long, long time. So thank you to everybody. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.